Welcome to another episode of the 100% podcast with me, your host, Harry Purdy. Today, I am delighted to be joined by a new guest. This guest has recently hosted me on their podcast, the Seeking Insights podcast. He is a health coach who helps people understand, let's put it in abbreviated commas, shall we, the mindset word. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Stuart Graham.
Hello, very excited to be here, especially with the caliber of guests you've had on previously. It's a bloody honor, to say the least.
Oh, mate, I very much appreciate that. And I think, well, no, not even I think, I know that today is going to bring up some conversation points that I really believe will help the listeners to this show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you mentioned there about the mindset in commas. Like, I do that on purpose. I think it's a bit of a, I'm going to throw it out there. It's a bit of a wonky term at the minute. Like, it's getting thrown around left, right, and center. It's a bit like elitist, but unfortunately, that's kind of also what people understand.
Mm.
So it's trying to find that balance between speaking to people in a way that they resonate with, but also avoiding saying mindset too much.
I think it's interesting as well because when I read I always do a little bit of research on people before they come on the show, and I was lucky enough to speak with you last week. But when it comes to that word, it could have, and it does have many meanings, right? But what does mindset mean to you?
I love how Carol Dweck kind of summarized it. Now, obviously, she wrote the book Mindset, and it was about like growth mindset, and it hasn't necessarily been applied to adults within the context of health and fitness from like a research perspective. So everyone's talking about like fixed versus growth mindsets, which is amazing. Like we can have some awareness around that. But the whole concept of mindset to her, and I think this is the one that I resonate with the most, is just your perception of self. It's how you interact with the world. It's how you feel about yourself. And I think we can start falling down this rabbit hole of like building quote unquote mindset. And it makes people feel or instantly gravitate towards things like discipline. And I'm not saying they're not a factor. Of course they are. Like discipline is one component, but it's one tiny component of a much bigger picture. So we can kind of get a bit lost and like, oh, I just don't have the mindset to work towards my goals because we've made this kind of connection between mindset and discipline. When in reality, there might be obstacles, there might be barriers, the way someone perceives the self, limiting beliefs, limiting assumptions. There could be like a plethora of things that's holding someone back from achieving their goals. And that's why I kind of try and tiptoe around the word, especially when at the moment there's a big barrage of like this growth in a drive towards mindset and talking about it, but it's always from this perspective of you just need to grind harder, you just need to, it's kind of crossing into the realm of hustle culture and this idea of like you don't need motivation, you need discipline. Motivation's the driver of all behavior, literally the driver of all behavior. Like you need motivation, otherwise you would do literally nothing.
Mm.
And it's this kind of dynamic that's like, I understand why people say it, but at the same time, that's not what any of the psychology research supports. So it's like, right, let's actually try and bring this to a way that people can start to understand what mindset is and start to explore that a little bit more.
For sure. And I love that as a great start to the show. And with mindset, I think there are little subheadings of what comes under that, right? And it could be like, for example, we spoke about my ultra last week on your show. And so with that, like the mindset around completing an ultra, I need to work on the resilience mindset, right? And with that, there was a little bit of self-discipline that needed to come in. Was there motivation? Yeah, there was motivation to finish it, but I couldn't rely on that throughout the training period. And I think all of those little areas come under like you could almost say the question is mindset for what? So if you feel like you are struggling or there's a challenge in your life, let's just say it could be around emotionally eating or it could be around not being able to get yourself in the gym. There just seems to be this hurdle that's there. Okay, that is definitely an area that you need to work on mindset in. But what area specifically is that mindset, or do you need to grow that mindset in?
Yeah, I think that what you said there are all these like little subheadings. There's these little categories there's these components of that will serve you depending on the goal. Like you obviously mentioned your ultra there, and like that resilience to push through that, building that confidence over time. Like confidence is going to fit into there. Of course, it is. Like you could start discussing, things like self-esteem. You could start putting like self-efficacy. Like how are you able to do the thing that you say that you're able to do? Are you able to take the steps, navigate the barriers that come up? And that, I feel like that's the bit that all gets forgotten about. And it just falls into this. And again, like discipline is a factor, of course it is. Like, but if you if you look, there isn't a definition of discipline under psychology. It's just not there. Because arguably what discipline is highly intrinsic motivation. Someone's doing it because they enjoy it. Someone's doing it because they're interested in it. Someone's doing it because it's aligned with their values and what they want to achieve. So it's like used quite colloquially in the sense of like, oh, well, I'm disciplined. Well, yeah, that's because you really enjoy doing the thing. You're not always enthusiastic. You're not always like, I'm buzzing to go and do this thing, but you value it. It's
Mm.
important to you. You understand the long-term benefits, and that's what you were saying there, right? Like you knew you wanted to achieve this. You knew you wanted to cross that finish line. So on those days where you were like, Jesus, I don't want to do this run, you've got a high level of or higher level of intrinsic motivation. You're much more up that end of the spectrum. And it's like, oh, actually, yeah, I feel really driven at the moment. Like I'm not feeling 100%, but I know that I want to achieve that. And even being able to understand that, because I think we can spend so long beating ourselves up that we don't have discipline, or we can feel undisciplined. And it's just putting our focus in the wrong area and opening that door to self-criticism, to self-shaming, especially with this pressure from that side of the space that is grind harder, just do the work kind of mentality.
Yeah, thought that's come to my mind there is it's almost like a perfectionist term, right? Just be disciplined. Okay. But if I'm trying to be disciplined in something that I really don't like doing, then I'm not going to do it. And doesn't matter how hard I try, I may turn up for the first two sessions, or it's like having an exercise that A, you aren't trained enough to do to be able to pull off, but B, you also don't enjoy it. When you look at your training plan on that day before you go to the gym, there's already automatically going to be a negative automatic reaction to that thing. Yeah, you know it might be building you strength, but we also know that there's 5 or 6 other versions of this exercise you could be doing to get that result. So, and I think when it comes to discipline, you're absolutely right. It's definitely you're disciplined to do the things that you want to do. And Paul says it a lot, doesn't he? He goes, you will know what your values are and you will know what's important to you by the actions you take. And the actions you take and what's important to you are normally the things that you enjoy doing and you like spending time on.
Yeah, I just think it's that it kind of alienates a lot of people
That's a
from
great way of putting it. Yeah.
entering the space. So like there's a lot of people out there that want to make change. They want to engage in health and fitness. They know the impact of it. Like they understand that they need to make it happen, but they just can't. They're struggling with that bit. There's a barrier there for them. And we've got this entire group of people that's saying like, oh, you just need to be disciplined. And that they then sit there going, oh, well, I'm not disciplined, so it's just not possible for me. When in reality, they're just doing something they really don't like.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of optimal is pushed when actually that's not realistic. That's not actually doable for someone. Like, yeah, absolutely, maybe 100 and is it 120 minutes of like zone two cardio and X amount of training sessions per week and hitting X amount of steps and having this particular split when it comes to food. Yeah, all of that might be optimal. But if the person hates it and that's not actually carrying over to their individual life, then they're never going to stick to it. So we need to kind of sometimes let go of this idea of optimal and meet people where they are. And I just don't think that that discipline does that. I just think it alienates people.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And you could almost swing that over to business as well, right? Like Alex Hormozy, like he is the optimal guy. Like he will talk to you about this doing things anyway, even if you think that you like it's shit, blah blah blah. And don't get me wrong, I completely agree. But let's not forget that this guy's already got millions of pounds in the bank or dollars in the bank. This guy's already got millions of followers. This guy's hosted the largest ever online webinar event that's ever existed. And his opinion and his thoughts, yes, of course, they should be well respected and listened to. But to get to that level of where he's at is, for most people in this space, I'm going to say it, not impossible, but almost, because he is at a level where he's put that much work in. If you listen to his podcasts, he's sacrificed relationships with his parents, sacrificed relationships in general. He's like broken relationships with old gym partners to get where he's want to be. It's almost ruthless. And you have to be ruthless to get to the top, right? Dog eat dog, etc. But most people, when you break it down and you go, okay, like on a fitness element, let's just like go with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Do you really want to look like that? Not really. Okay, well, you don't really need to be optimal then. You just need, just got to look after your hydration, high protein, and monitor the food that you're in consuming to drop a few pounds off the scales. And then on the flip side, on a business side of thing, okay, yeah, Alex Hormozy tells you to do 57 different things in a week. Let's just do 25 of them and see how you get on to get the results. And I think the optimal bro, the optimal split, the optimal this, the optimal that definitely can alienate people.
Yeah, I think with Alex as well, like when you listen to him speak, he doesn't have hobbies apart from lifting. Because, like we've just said there about discipline, right? Like, he loves business. It's the only thing he cares about. That is his sole driver. So, like, he works every hour under the sun, but it's not work for him because he loves doing it. It's the only thing that he's focused on. So he is so intrinsically motivated by business. Like, he's not doing it for the money because you mentioned yourself, he's got the money. He's not doing it for XYZ. He's doing it because he absolutely loves playing the game of business.
Mm,
So, like, it's so easy, especially as business owners, to be like, wow, he's doing so much. I should do so much. But we're different people, and that's okay. Like, we don't need to be him. We don't need to act in the way that he does. We don't need to have the same values. Like, we're all completely unique humans living this shared human experience. And it's like that paradox of we're all the same, but we're also all different. So like if you don't want to live your life like that, then don't.
yeah,
But he is a great example of like what you discussed about the sort of the cling film ceiling and this is what is possible. He's delivering on this if you want to go down that road. If you don't want to go down that road, absolutely no problem. He's set an example of what you could possibly do, of how much output is achievable. But anyone that interviews him says the same. They say like he's just another breed. Like there's no one that anyone's met that has the same work ethic that he does. And for whatever reason that is, like we're not here to pathologize or speculate or like he's just his own human and he works in that way and he loves doing that. But like he is insane when it comes to work ethic. Like he's absolutely insane. But again, like, do you want to live that life?
that's the final. I think that's the final point to end on that. And I think it's really easy to get sucked into the whole comparison thing on that subject. But then actually, when you break it down, it's like the whole $1 million question of, do you actually really want a level of fame that a professional footballer has or a high end list A celebrity has? I think if you was to break it down really, yeah, the money maybe is like nice and almost, I guess, the sense of feeling like you're wanted, maybe. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here, but actually the negatives that go alongside that, the lack of privacy, the lack of freedom, the fact that you've got one manager who's in charge of your social media telling you you've got to do this, and then you've got your next uh I don't know, publicity manager telling you that you've got to be here, here, and here at this time on this day for this shoot and then this recording and then you've got to do this for Sky Sports as well. Like it can all add up and quite quickly you may be thinking you're living the life that you really want, but actually there's no freedom involved in it.
Yeah, and if one of your values is freedom and autonomy and feeling as though you're in control, then yeah, obviously that's definitely you're gonna sacrifice that. And like you said there, how many people chase the fame, they chase the money. It's all extrinsic motivators. It comes back to what we said at the start. Like it's all a reward for something. It's not because you love doing the thing. So I think if you're building that on shaky foundations, if your self-esteem is rooted in other people validating you, if your self-worth is with other people, then it's like the only way that you feel content in yourself is by looking to others and getting approval from others. In the same way, I suppose you could argue what you mentioned about comparison. Like if you're comparing yourself to another person, which is completely normal, I absolutely the advice of don't compare is the most ridiculous advice out there because it's just not possible.
And it's a human
Yeah, it's
nature,
like a
right? Yeah,
completely normal human thing to do. So like but it's this idea of if you're always comparing, you're always saying like me compared to that person isn't enough, then what do you think is going to make you enough? And it's an internal job, isn't it?
for sure. In terms of where you're at, then, mate, you're now coaching people in mindset, and we're going to use that terminology seriously now. With every coaching or every bit of coaching or every bit of success that the people I've spoken to have had, it's normally come from an area that they've struggled in themselves. And I'm not making assumptions here, but normally when it comes, so obviously with my journey, like the biggest challenges I had were with my depression around Christmas 4 years ago have led me to start this podcast to help other people. And then of course the weight loss journey as well. Is that a similar thing to you in terms of you had your challenges, you then really enjoyed it in some aspects it would have been learning about yourself that you've now got the tools that you have obviously incredible value to offer other people now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think everyone's got a story, right? Like, and I think we touched on this on my podcast when we were chatting. Like everyone's got their own story. Everyone's got these unique struggles, and I think we can get so lost in our own that we think like it's just us. And reflecting back, like I never went to any sort of doctor or got help for mental illness potentially at the time. And I'm not here to sit here and diagnose myself and say I had X, Y, Z, but I really fucking struggled. So there was a period where home life was dynamic, to say the least. There was a lot of stresses, there was a lot of pressures, there was a hell of a lot going on in my personal life that I just didn't tell anyone about. I just kept it to myself. Um, I was very isolated. I didn't want to be a burden on friends. I didn't feel like people would understand when I spoke to them. So that was kind of like a journey that started me doing the more introspective work. It was like, actually, I can't, I'm not sure if I can continue here. And then it was this real, right, well, I need to do something. I need to do something different. And I started doing that self-exploration. I started journaling, I started reading, I started listening to podcasts. And there came a point where I'd recently got into a relationship and we'd had like an amazing time and we'd been going away and doing all sorts. And I thought, you know what, like I'm gonna get a little bit leaner and I'll get the support of a coach. And I'm by no means abdicating responsibility here. It was all mine. I took an approach that was massively unsustainable, that was done for the wrong reasons. What we said about earlier on, the motivation was to find my worth. It was because I wanted the external validation of having abs. I wanted people to say to me that I was enough because I had abs. I wanted to feel that, which was the wrong reason to do it. Because I always felt this lingering ambient lack of doubt, lack of value that I could bring to the world, didn't feel like I was enough. So I thought that would solve it. So then I pursued that, took a ridiculous approach, lost a relatively, I think, I'm trying to think back to what it was. I want to say maybe like, was it 15 kilos in like 9, 10 weeks?
Bloody
I
hell.
I wasn't heavy at the time. Like I was 80 something kilos. So I was like 82 kilos, lost 15 kilos, lost all my sex drive, had no energy whatsoever, was having blackout binges, ordered two large Domino's pizzas and four cookies, Ate a lot. Can't remember a second of it. The only thing I can remember is my head being in the toilet throwing up because I'd ate so much so quickly. Like the typical quote unquote cheat meals. Like just it was ridiculous. And I got to the other side of that and I was like, there's a better way to do this. The worst thing about it is I knew there was. I knew there was.
at the time?
At the time. I knew there was a better way. I knew about calories. I knew about I didn't need to cut them so low. But in that moment, I was so kind of desperate to make that change. And I was so much of a people pleaser that didn't want to speak up, that didn't want to cause any drama, that didn't like conflict, that I just went along with it. And that was a real turning point for me. And that was kind of what led my journey into coaching of like, I don't want anyone to go through that experience, to feel as though that they can't speak up in coaching, to feel as though that they have to take this approach that completely decimates the relationship with food. Like I was lean, but I felt the worst that I'd ever felt. And that was a bold claim. Like I felt horrific in my own body. Mentally, my body image, I just never thought I was going to be lean enough. Like I was obsessed with the scales. Again, I knew better about the scales, but when you're so in it emotionally, it's so hard to navigate. And I think this is the part where, like, when people come to me and say, like, oh, the scales are messing with my head. I know I've been there. I used to weigh myself 5 times a day to just make sure that I wasn't gaining. I was checking my abs under my t-shirt to make sure they were still there. Like I was body checking all the time. I was looking in mirrors. I was looking in shiny surfaces. Like I was just trying to make sure they were there. Am I thin enough? Am I getting fat on my face? Like this constant barrage of thoughts that was there. Like I don't want anyone else to go through that. And arguably where I was the few years prior when I was struggling with my mental health probably was a contributor to that. And I'm not going to step back and say that it wasn't. And that's not going to be everyone's experience. But at the same time, we can take an approach that doesn't need to lead people there.
Yeah, man. And I think what's strikes me about that is it's what your brain can do to you at times, even though, and you're coherent to what it's telling you, even though you know it's bad advice, you kind of do the thing anyway. So, in terms of recovery for you, then obviously you were, like you said, your words were, I think you used the word obliterated, or well, let's just go with obliterated, your relationship with food.
Mm.
That couldn't have been an easy fix to get back on top of. So tell us about the steps of recovery there.
No, and again, like I'm not going to sit here and say I had an eating disorder because I didn't. I would never. It was disordered eating for sure, but it wasn't an eating disorder. They're complex and well beyond our scope as practitioners anyway. But coming out the other side of that was about starting to. It was getting really clear on why I'd taken that approach for me personally. And again, I'd love to be able to be like, oh, do X, Y, Z. But because it is so complex and because it is so personal, like the approach that I took might look completely different to someone else's. But for me, it was starting to bring awareness to, right, actually, how often am I body checking? It was trying to actively reduce that, being like, right, today I body checked 15 times. Tomorrow I'm going to try and body check 14 times and just slowly wean them down. It was, even though I knew the scale, I just stepped away from the scales completely. Like I just did like a complete cut off from them, because that was going to be realistically what was best for me at that time. Again, not suitable for everyone. It was just trying to reduce this preoccupation with my body because it was arguably my body that was causing the issues with food. So this is where body image comes into it, and this is the bit that I feel isn't spoken about a lot generally, but isn't especially in men. And that is like the way I perceived myself at that time was not the real reflection of where I was. And that's what body image is. It's just your perception. But because our perceptions are influenced by our emotions, by things like stress, tiredness, all of those things can influence how we feel in that moment about ourselves, the way that we see ourselves, which is why you can wake up one day and feel like, oh, fucking hell, I feel really good today. I feel really good in my body today. And you wake up the next day and feel like a complete bag of dicks. Your body hasn't changed. It hasn't changed in 24 hours. What has changed is how you're perceiving it. So it was about that. It was about working on that. It was about reintroducing foods that I'd previously been avoiding. It was working on food labels and not labeling food good, bad anymore. It was understanding that all foods are food. They don't need labels. They're not healthy. They're not unhealthy. They're not good. They're not bad. They're not dirty. They're not clean. They're not anything. They're just food. Some are going to align more with my particular goals. Some are going to be more nutrient dense. Some are going to be more calorie dense. That's okay. There's no morality that we need to assign to that because it's context dependent. Like you could get an avocado and you could say that is a quote unquote good food. But if I eat enough avocados that I gain body fat over a prolonged period of time where that negatively impacts my health, is that still a good food?
This is the thing.
Well, no. So we can start to find these pieces of evidence, and like I'm quite a logical person. Like I'm an engineer. Well, I was an electrical. Started off an electrician and did like HND and stuff. So like logic works quite well for me. So I started playing about with that and exploring my beliefs and challenging some of my beliefs around food and around my body. There was a lot of journaling, there was a lot of meditating, there was a lot of that self-awareness work, and it wasn't an easy journey, and I'll never be finished on it. And I think it's understanding that these things are all on spectrums, like body image, relationship with food. They can move up and down, and that's okay. They're probably gonna. Like, I lost my dad, well, it'll be a year and a half ago, and my relationship with food changed when that happened, and I noticed it and I felt it, and I was emotionally eating, and that's okay because that was the thing that I needed at that time. And I just, it's so easy to fall down this trap of like, we need to cut these foods out and we need to eliminate emotional eating. No, we don't. It's a completely human coping mechanism that we all use to soothe in the moment. Like we don't need to eliminate it. We maybe need to diversify our toolkit, but we don't need to eliminate it. So things like that, like if you're feeling guilt and shame around foods, that's not conducive to long-term change. That's not conducive to health. In the same way, if you're feeling guilt and shame around a behavior, like this idea of eliminating a behavior makes it sound as if it's bad, but it's not. It's just a behavior. It just is. And I'd argue that it's serving you in the moment. Like it serves a purpose. All behavior makes sense in context.
Yeah, the only I think all of that made absolute sense. I think the only way or the only thing that I would ask somebody would be if they believe their behavior is having an impact on somebody else. And then that can kind of cross that border of, for example, somebody who's highly stressed and volatile, if they're taking it out on somebody at the time, they could say that that behavior is serving them. And I'm not here to challenge what you're saying, Stu. I'm just like making conversation, right? Um, but actually, if you got them in a room and like with a therapist or whoever, somebody close to them, and you ask them what was the reason that you did XYZ behavior, they would say, well, actually, because at the time it made me feel better. But on the flip side, the other side of the fence, you've like kicked somebody in the nads, basically, you know, and that's and but uh, in terms of what you're saying now, I completely get it. And there's some behaviors that I still have because I think what doesn't get spoken about enough is, or what I've seen, especially in the industry lately, is people kind of like black labeling people who have had eating disorders, like loosely put, or mental health challenges within the fitness industry. But actually, surely, if anybody's gone through any body change, or if anybody's taken body changing drugs, or all of these things, or they can't not exercise, right? These are all parts that have got little kind of, I call them like little yellow flag or amber flags. They're showing their head, but they're not really a huge issue. They could all be deemed by a psychiatric professional as an addictive behavior or an unhealthy behavior that you're performing on yourself. And I don't think it's spoken about enough, to be honest with you. And I'll honestly say here that the thought always goes through my head as well. If I have a bad day with eating, that little chimp brain of mine will come in and say, or the middle brain, like the computer will go, well, okay, we don't want to get the same results as you had in 2017, Harry. You know, and is that a healthy thought or not? That's the question, right? Because it's only one day of bad eating, and I know how to deal with that. Is like not to worry about it, but there's always that thought that almost makes you have to admit like when your dad unfortunately passed away, I'm sorry to hear about that. Like there must have been that thought process in your head when you were having those days where you'd eat a little bit more than normal and obviously emotionally eating, that you'd be questioning yourself, but almost quietening the questioning that was going on.
Yeah, and this is the thing, right? All of this is context dependent. So, like you explained a context around a behavior there where that is harming someone else. That's maladaptive behavior, of course, it is, but it's serving the person.
This is it.
It's not serving anyone else. It's serving the person, and it's understanding that, like, again, behave. It's not good or bad. It's adaptive or maladaptive. So, like, we're adding this element of morality to this. Like, so same example where someone lashes out, but it's to defend someone. Same behavior,
Yeah.
circumstance. So it's all context dependent. And again, this is why these broad labels, like trying to shift away from them a little bit, is really helpful. So, like what you said there around the emotional eating, like I knew I was emotional eating. I knew that there was a process that when like it wasn't just a case of I was emotional eating. It's like, right, what do I feel right now? Like there was every what felt like a complete like just emotional roller coaster. And it was like, actually, I know that right now I can eat and I'm okay with that. And I'm going to make that as an intentional choice. There was intention there to do it. And I think this is alluded to what you were saying there around those like amber flags or like, people exercising. Like, why are you doing that? What's the intention behind that? What are you trying to achieve by doing it? So like in that moment, I was trying to soothe those emotions and I was okay with that. Like I could have went for a walk, I could have went and I could have went and drank alcohol, but that wouldn't be the thing that the future version of me will thank me for. Like I could have just got smashed, but I didn't. What I did was I ate a little bit more food than normal. That on the grand scheme of things made no difference. So what you were saying there about intention, like why are you exercising every day? Is it because you're afraid not to? Because the intention that's driving the behavior arguably could matter. In the same way with calories, right? Like people track calories. What's the intention? Are you tracking calories to gain an awareness around food? Or are you tracking calories because without calorie tracking, you've got what feels like no structure and you feel like you lose control? Two different intentions completely change the behavior. The behavior is the same, calorie counting. The behavior exercising is the same. It's that intention and it's that context that kind of changes that dynamic. And I think helping people explore that, like what we're saying now, we haven't mentioned discipline once because this is that side of mindset that just gets kind of like shoved under the carpet. Of like, arguably, if we want to help people make long-term change, we need to help them change the behavior. And as part of behavior change, we need to do this, explore intentions, be able to identify what those are, regulate our emotions, understand how our body feels, works. Those are the things that are gonna lead to longer term change for people and equip them with them skills. Like you say, resilience being a big one, being able to handle failure, being able to handle things not going to plan, having a set of strategies for when that happens to be like, actually, yeah, this really sucks. Because that's something no one talks about. Like everyone's like, oh, fail, fail, fail. Like you need to learn to fail. Yeah, it doesn't make it mean it sucks any less.
No.
Like you give your absolute everything and you fail, it really sucks. And we just don't make space for that. We're just like, oh, failing's a good thing. At the time, it doesn't feel like it. And I think letting people know that, of being like, yeah, it really does. When you give your everything and you still fall short, that is a kick to the nads. That is a blow to the stomach. But it's about what you do after that. It's about how you respond to that in that moment. Are you going to let that stop you from keeping moving forward? Or are you going to allow yourself a bit of space to feel that, explore it a little bit, be there in it, and then come up with a strategy to keep moving forward?
Yeah, and that definitely is something. I think it could fall into so many aspects, right? Because you have a bad day at work, it can trigger some emotion. You come home and you're in like a dieting phase, or you're trying to lose some weight after Christmas, and you go, oh fuck it, there's shortbread in the drawer, or whatever it may be. You've got the pot of Pringles left over from New Year's Eve, and then the next thing you know, you're like I don't know 600 calories deep, and then you kind of get that regret, or it could be you're sitting in a space of a failed attempt at setting up a business or a podcast, or a failed attempt at maintaining a relationship. Somebody's walked away from you even though you've given everything to them, or a friendship, you've had a real big fallout. These are all things in life that can are emotional events and will trigger some form of emotion with you. And to say that, like, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's again, it's that optimal like mindset. Just deal with it, bro. Don't get stuck there. Like, or yeah, or whatever terminology, and don't get stuck there. Keep moving forward. Sometimes I personally believe, and this is a personal opinion, especially when it comes to friendships, and like if you're just moving off from job to job to job because it seems to be the same issue that keeps creeping up, or you've come out of a relationship, or you've literally had a massive argument with your partner, and it keeps rearing its head. Is sometimes moving on quickly and moving on to the next thing isn't actually the healthiest thing to do. It is sometimes to just sit there and deal with the emotions that you're going through. And yeah, there's got to be a balance between getting stuck in the past and allowing your past to dictate your future kind of narrative. But sometimes it's good to just have a little feel around what's working, what's not, what's happened in the last three jobs that I've been at that has kept making me feel these things. Is it something I'm not doing? Am I worrying about the work element of things rather than me? Okay, let's look at my last, I don't know, two relationships. Like, what's happened there? Is there anything that I'm not doing, or has it been the other person, or is there kind of some joint responsibility I can take here? And there's a place for that. And I don't think that gets spoken about enough, especially in the motivation, discipline, like optimal mindset kind of narrative. Like actually stopping and doing nothing and sitting and feeling these things can be just as important as writing out a 20-point plan for what you're going to do next.
Yeah, and I think this leads into something that I've been dwelling on quite a lot recently. And I think it's amazing that we're equipping people with tools like journaling, like ice baths, like all of these things that we're seeing now. Like these are amazing. Like people are getting great benefits from them. They're finding ways that it benefits them. Awesome. But how much are we using that as just a way to avoid again? In the sense of like, I feel awful, but rather than allowing myself to be there, to feel that, to create a container to express that within, I'm gonna focus on XYZ. I'm gonna try and find reasons to be grateful prematurely, which we've actually got research to show doesn't help. Brad Stulberg talks about it in his book, The Master of Change, I want to say. And this is actually something was it his practice of groundedness? He had a 48-hour rule. And I think this applies to what you're saying now. And it's give yourself 48 hours after every big win, like these huge wins, and after every loss. Give yourself 48 hours. In that 48 hours, you can celebrate, you can feel pity, you can feel sorry for yourself, you can, whatever you need to do. But after 48 hours, get back to work. Because no matter what happens, you're going to have to do that anyway. If it's a win, you don't want to get complacent. If it was a mistake, if it was a fuck up, well, you don't want to quit. So give yourself 48 hours. And I thought that was a lovely little frame that seemed to really resonate when I read it. I'm not a huge fan of rules, but like 48 hours seems to be like a decent little time frame. Obviously, for big losses, it's going to be completely different. Like, for example, grief. The grieving process is complicated to say the least. But I would question how much of these tools that we've got now are we using to just further avoid feeling emotions. Like we're like notably bad at it as men. I'm not pretending to be good at it. Like struggle to describe them. How do you feel? Happy, sad, or angry? They're your three options. Stressed, maybe, if you're feeling particularly fluent in emotional language. Like that's how we talk. And there's none of this like this is where I feel this emotion. Like, oh, actually, I am feeling a bit anxious today. Like, when have you spoken to someone, I'm feeling a bit anxious today? It's just not said. Like, but people do. Anxiety is a completely normal thing that we all experience, especially in today's culture. Like, that emotion of anxiety, that feeling of anxiety, like, we feel it. But it's just not letting that completely rule us. But that doesn't mean we need to completely deny it either. There's kind of like this middle ground again, I suppose it's on a spectrum, just like anything else. Like we don't need to completely suppress because they lead to the same problems. At some point in time, it bubbles over. I've been there and it happened. Like just explosive, angry outbursts, like losing the absolute plot, shouting at people. And it was a tiny thing. Like it was a tiny thing that happened. It was completely insignificant. But it wasn't that. That was just the final. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was everything prior to that. Like, it was all of the times where I hadn't held a boundary. It was all of the times where I hadn't spoke my mind. It was all of the times where I felt like I'd been disrespected or I was frustrated. Or it was all of that that was building up to those blowouts. But it's just still like emotional suppression. So this is kind of what I've been thinking about lately, and it's are we using tools to just further emotionally suppress, or are we use them as ways to explore those? And I think there's a distinct distinction there.
Yeah, I love that, mate. And I think the two analogies, it's like Buckaroo, right? Is all of those problems that you're experiencing and the challenges that may be going through your head or you're experiencing in your life, you kind of add it on to the Buckaroo toy, right? Boom. Okay, that's another one I'm avoiding. Boom. That's another one I'm avoided. Boom. Another one. And then finally that one little addition to that Buckaroo, you put it on there, that one, it may be a bad day at work, or somebody may have not put the bloody sweetener in your coffee or something like that. And that could be the one little trigger that makes you go, not like go absolutely ballistic, but say something that you might regret 24 hours later, or you lose your marbles with somebody who means a lot to you. And that is where you need to take heed. And I'm not telling people what to do here, but if that sounds like something that you're experiencing and you do feel like you're constantly on that level of high threshold stress where you don't know the next time you're going to blow, then we need to start having a little look and ask yourself, okay, what am I doing now? What am I doing in my day-to-day life that I know could be causing me stress? Or what is there in my life that I could be doing? What could I be adding to my life to take a little bit of stress away from me? All of the habits that you've spoken about, a couple of them today, with meditating, with journaling, with going for those walks, spending time in nature, getting yourself in the sun, eating nutritious food. There's so many studies coming out now showing the detrimental effect that eating too much man-made food, chemically imbalanced stuff can do to our hormones and our bodies, which is something that makes absolute sense. Seen as though 2,000 years ago we wouldn't eat anything other than almost the paleo diet, right? It would be meat and veg and fruits. And that'll be it. Think of all of the things in a supermarket now that wouldn't have existed like 300 years ago, less than thousands of years ago, you know? And like these are all things that can have a huge impact on us.
Yeah, and I think something it was like those snaps. They're like where we're reacting. We're from this. We're not grounded in ourselves there. Like we're not in a place where we're like regulated, where we are calm and collected. We're stressed. We're in that like hyper aroused state where we're kind of just like a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. One of the best things, especially when it comes to, we've talked about behaviors, like being able to cultivate space between reaction and response. So, like, reactions tend to be really emotively driven. They're from this place of snap, they're quite quick, they're reactive, they're like really on the go. Whereas responses are wise and intentional, they're slow, they're like, these are the emotions I'm experiencing right now. But actually, what's going to be best for the future version of me? What's the version of me tomorrow morning going to thank me for today? What does this person opposite me right now, what are they experiencing? How does that change how I am going to respond to this situation? And I think being able to just take that breath, breathe deep down into our bellies, and be like, right, this is where I am. This is maybe the action that's going to be best aligned. Being able to just understand that other people are going to be snappy, like being open to that and being really like in our own zone, firm where we are, and knowing that actually, yeah, like I am really calm and collected right now. That's going to be. Think of what that would do for your day-to-day life. That's emotional regulation. That's nervous system regulation. It's not discipline.
Yeah.
Do you know what
I
I mean? This is
yeah,
the bit, this is the bit that's so far beyond what that realm sits in. And it's like, actually, if you knew how to regulate your nervous system, if you could calm yourself down in the moment, and this is something that I'm only starting to learn about. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not pretending to be any kind of guru, or like we're never a finished product. And I think it's really important to understand that we're all flawed inherently. We're never going to be perfect, and we can only keep chipping away towards keep moving forwards towards our goals, towards the vision of what we want with our lives. But it makes it a hell of a lot easier if we're starting to pick up and work on some of these skills along the way and build that awareness. But from a regulated perspective, like if our bodies all intertwine, so like our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, and our behaviors all influence one another. So like this is arguably why people have too much coffee and feel a bit like they're having a bit of a panic attack, because the physiological sensations that caffeine causes, quicker heart rate, potential body temperature increase, like maybe blood pressure changes.
I'm only laughing because I took a pre-workout for the first time and
Oh man, I bet it felt awful, did it?
horrendous.
Yeah.
Fucking awful. Like I was shaking like a shitting dog about an hour after I took it. Well, to the point, I'm sorry for butting in, by the way. I
That's all
just had
right.
to, yeah, yeah. I was talking to my good friend Aaron in the gym, and I swear my hands and like I was almost having like it was almost like I was having I stood up having a mini fit. Like I was like, I should never have took this, and it put me off completely. But just completely agree with you. And even the many things that we do on a day-to-day basis that can have and change the way that our nervous system makes us feel. And the biggest example for me with that would be when you know that you're approaching a potentially or what your body deems as a dangerous or scary situation that there may be some nerves around. So that could be for me be like play it like every Saturday when I was playing football and not doing all of this running, every Saturday morning I'd have the same feeling in my stomach. It was like I knew I'd had to prep myself for this game, eat the right things, blah blah blah. And then of course with the running as well, the big days, like you always wake up with that pinchy, like, and it's like, do you frame it as nerves or do you frame it as excitement? Same as going out and speaking in public. All of these things are completely normal. You've got to go and approach somebody and tell them like a few home truths, an uncomfortable conversation that's taking you out of your comfort zone. These feelings are all there and they're supposed to be there. But if we can biohack, psychologically hack the way that we handle them, and really 9 times out of 10, the way that we get better at handling them is by putting ourselves in those situations a little bit more often, then like even if it takes the edge off by 20%, I think that we can call self-growth.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said there about anxiety, or is it anxiety, is it excitement? Why not both?
Yeah.
You can feel more than one emotion at the same time. It doesn't have to be either or, it can just be both. Like you're allowed to be both. Like, yeah, absolutely. Because you're doing something big, you're doing something scary, you're stepping outside your comfort zone, but you maybe really want to do that too. So you can be both. You can be that excited and that anxious. And I think, what you said there around this working on that ability to express that and explore that. And this is the thing that I've arguably struggled with a lot. And that is being able to get into my body, to be able to feel it. Like we live in our heads. It's all thoughts, it's all stories, it's all meaning that we give things. It's like someone says something and we make it mean something. We tell ourselves a story about it. You stand on the scales and you feel awful after it. Well, it's not the scales, they're an inanimate object. It's what you've made that number mean. It's the story that you've told yourself about that number. And it's the same way with this. It's just like understanding that actually we live in our heads so much. We're trying to give meaning to stuff. We're not allowing ourselves to explore our body. And it's not a one way, like it's not a one-way street. Our brains and bodies go two ways. So by not exploring that and exploring our felt sense and being able to identify the sensations that we're feeling, maybe when we are feeling tense or tight, maybe there's tightness in your chest because you are feeling a bit anxious. Maybe that's where you feel it. Maybe understand, oh, my palms are like really tingling at the moment, and being able to check into these. We're missing out on a huge amount of information that our body's given us. And if we want to be able to make an informed decision, which is arguably what a response is, wise and informed decision, then we need to use our bodies. We need to explore that. And again, it's not easy. I'm not pretending that it is. Like most things, it's much easier said than done. But this is the stuff that I love just because I'm a curious person. So
Yeah.
like, I love exploring this. I love learning more. And I think when you start to listen to some of the people who've done like a lot of breath work, a lot of self-awareness work, they have been down this road of like trying to regulate the nervous system. And that might not be the right path for everyone. But if it's there and we've got the option to explore that as well, then that fits under mindset. And it's like this is why I think the terms that umbrella, like you said, it's just like there's loads of subcategories, there's loads of labels, there's loads of other things underneath that we can work on and we can build. And it sounds really complicated, but you don't do it all at once. Like I've been involved in like self-awareness for like self improvement, self-awareness, self-development, call it whatever you want. For like I used to do karate and we would meditate before every class and at the end of every class. And I did that for 10 years. Arguably when I was a kid, we weren't meditating. Like I was probably just messing about because I was like 10. But you know what I mean? Like that was from when I was 13, 14 to now. That's like 17 years. And I am still a deeply, deeply, deeply flawed human. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if sometimes you feel as though, like, if people could see in my head, they'd be like, what the fuck is going on? But then you realize that everyone's like that.
Yeah.
We're all the same.
Was
And
there
we
you got
all have that really textured, really complicated, really messy reality. And I think just being able to accept that makes it a little bit easier.
oh mate, for sure. Sometimes you've got to embrace the madness within, I think, especially yeah. And as soon as you learn that, as soon as you learn that everybody's got a little bit of madness in them, then life becomes a little bit easier, that's for sure. Stu, mate, what unbelievable chat this has been so far. I've got three questions remaining for you. One of them might be a little bit of a stitch up, but it's because you asked me it on my episode on your show. I
Mm.
thought, do you know what? I would love to ask that question back. So you did ask me three, but what I would love to know is what is the biggest standout thing that somebody has said, takeaway that you've got from a guest on your show?
Oh, that is a big question. You have to give me a moment to think of this one.
You carry on, mate. Yeah, I thought it would be interesting because I know that you like to ask that to all of your guests, like who run their podcasts. So I thought it would be a good one to ask you as well.
I think it would be really difficult to pick one, but there's a few that stand out because there's been some truly like standout episodes. There tends to be like an indicator of when this happens. I get like head to toe goosebumps, and it like I feel it, like I feel that what that person was saying. And this was just a tiny snippet from an episode with a guy called Pat Divley. And he said, are you revolving or are you evolving? Are you just going round in circles or are you growing?
Wow. Yeah, I like it.
And I think that just fits with what we've said about this conversation. You know, what you were saying earlier on about, are you just repeating the same patterns? Are you just doing the same thing? Are you just hopping job to job? Are you just going in relationship, out of relationship? Are you revolving or are you evolving? And that was a beautiful little snippet. As I said, there could be loads because so everyone's got that little nugget that they've got to share, and some of them have been phenomenal, I have to say. So yeah, that's the one that came right to front of mind from this conversation. But I don't want that to discredit anyone else's nuggets that have been on.
Yeah, mate, 100%. I completely agree. And like, well, obviously, you asked me the top three. I could have gone with
100.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Next question. what is next for you, the podcast, and well, just you in life?
Well, we were potentially going to be debating to move back to the UK, but we're not. So we're going to stay in Gibraltar for a little bit longer. I think for me, for the podcast, I'm going to try and continue to get some amazing guests on and just ask them questions. I love just getting to know people. I've made some amazing friends from doing it. I've learned an absolute shed ton along the way. So yeah, it's just to continue to get some amazing guests on and share that with my audience. I'm going to continue to go for my coaching, continue to grow as a coach. I think if I didn't do that, I'd be doing a disservice to the people that I work with, to the people that I could potentially work with. There's some skills that I would like to explore some more for sure there. What order I do those in, I'm not entirely sure. And then from a personal perspective, aside from work and career, and I think I need to explore play more. I've been very serious. I've been very driven towards business, to being successful, to work, to all of these things. And play has kind of slipped to the side. So something creative, something enjoyable that's done simply for the joy of itself is something I feel I need to embody a little bit more this year.
I love that, man. That's so self-aware to admit, because I think it's a little side note. I think when you are in the space of podcasting, especially on the topics that we talk about, it is really hard sometimes to switch off of the mindset of, am I
Doing
growing
it.
here? Am I
Thinking of-
learning? Am I getting better? To just actually experiencing like the what is, and sometimes I do think we have to also remember that, like you said earlier, my friend, is that we are all unique individuals, and sometimes actually like you can compare yourself in a bad way to others because they are just doing things in general life and they're not worried about the growth side of things, right? So it's like swings and roundabouts, but I completely get it and I fully resonate with that statement.
I think it's interesting because we do this thing that we call self-development,
Yeah.
but for what?
Yeah, I know.
Like we're all, and it's so easy because what we end up doing is falling into the trap of the arrival fallacy. That is, when we get somewhere, everything will be solved, all our problems will be gone. So I've become more aware of, like, I would never go on a walk without my headphones. I always had to listen to a podcast or an audiobook and how much of that self-development, how much of that is just like mental masturbation?
Yeah.
Are you applying it? Are you doing it in real life? Are you living a life that's truly aligned with your values? Are you giving space for play? Are you giving space, like, again, especially in the, like, everyone's like, oh, pleasure is a bad thing, is it? Like, is pleasure not supposed to be in our lives? Are we not supposed to include that as well? Like, is there not space for all of this? And I'm just very aware of constantly trying to strive for more, but for what? Like, yeah, great, doing all this self development and awareness and but am I still trying to seek my worth? And it's a question that constantly comes up of being like, what am I doing this for? Why am I taking this route? Why am I trying to do this? And I don't have an answer. Like I can't give you it. Like I don't know. And I guess I'll find out. Ask me again in 5 years and we'll see where I
Do
am there.
you know what? We'll ask each other the same question again, I'm sure. And that question there, again, it's just like I just completely agree with you, and I completely feel what you're saying is like the for what thing, and even with the whole, like I spoke to you about it. I've had to really be, I've had to really question myself around the whole why am I trying to cut a little bit of weight during this first quarter of the year, because again, it's like really I need to really hone in on the reasons. Because if it's just for a photo that a few people can like in 90 days time, then that's fucking bullshit. Throw it away. But luckily, like I say, luckily, like thankfully I've found that it's not just that. And now I've got the London Marathon coming up
Yeah.
as well. Like if I lost a few kg, it would help. So yeah, anyway, final question for today's podcast is, what is the greatest bit of advice you've ever been given?
Again, big question. Big question.
It's my favorite, actually. There's been some absolute, like,
I can imagine. I had no pressure out, by the way.
yeah,
Glad
yeah.
you got on. Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, I've just dropped one there and I on you. Sorry, mate.
What I am going to do though is I'm going to say a word,
Go on.
and it's something to embody and try and embrace more of, something to encourage. And I know it's one that we both have. It's something we try and strive for, and that's curiosity.
Mate.
Get curious. Like, start exploring, and that doesn't just mean why. Like, that doesn't mean asking why all the time. Sometimes that means asking what. Like, not why am I feeling this? What am I feeling? Not why am I thinking this way? What am I thinking? Like, get curious, explore, because you can't judge yourself at the same time as being genuinely curious. If you're open, that means you're approaching something with no prior judgments. So that self-critic that tears you apart can't, because you're curious. You're just exploring. That's interesting. It's a lovely little lead-in that people can use. That's interesting. Why did I think that? That's interesting. What am I feeling right now? And it's just this gateway to curiosity that can really help. And one that you mentioned about the podcast earlier on, and I said about Pat's example, there was another one from a guy called Jamie, and this is super relevant for what we've been talking about. That's why I'm trying to slot it in right at the end. Jamie came on and talked about breath work, and he mentioned we are so obsessed with self-development, self-awareness, self-growth, but we complete self-regulation. We completely forget about community. We completely forget about co-regulation. We completely forget about including other people, growing together, being part of something, allowing one to help another. We completely forget about that in the pursuit of self, and how much of that is leading to these loneliness issues that everyone's having across the world. We're so focused on ourselves, we're so focused on our own growth, we're so focused on self-development that apparently that everyone tells us is this lonely road. How much of that's self-perpetuating? So get curious, be willing to do that with someone else. Ask questions, ask questions with your pals, sit down and have conversations if people are willing to have those conversations. Surround yourself with people who you can explore these with, but definitely get curious.
Mate, you know, I gave the old swish reference. You fucking swished it there, boy. Superb work. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Stu, if people want to come and find you, find more about you, where can they come and see you?
Instagram's the best place, stu.graham.s25, or the podcast Seeking Insights, which you're a fantastic guest on, so I recommend listening to that
Ah,
one
yes, I'll link
first.
that in the
Um,
podcast description as well.
Yeah, but no, a huge thank you to you, sir, for having me on, for having this conversation. I think there's not enough space at times to have these conversations, the nuance that we can bring. And it's been a pleasure chatting to you, picking your mind as well, because I always learn something from anyone that I speak to. So I sincerely appreciate the invitation and being here.
Mate, honestly, the last couple of weeks with our chats, like obviously being kind enough to host me on yours, and then the return journey over here as well has been really nice, mate, to get to know you. And there's some incredible insights, really balanced views on things. And like you say, I don't think there's enough talk. I think sometimes it's really easy to jump on a pod and go motivation, discipline, resilience, blah, 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 when actually like there are many other caveats to those stories. So thank you for being honest and sharing your story with us today. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please go over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and drop a 5-star review. It does go a long, long way to helping the show. If you are watching on YouTube, hello. Down below here somewhere is the like and subscribe button. Make sure you click it before you leave. I will see you here with a new episode very soon. Take care.